The sun hung low over the wide horizon, spilling its molten gold across the dusty paths of the village. The air shimmered with that quiet beauty that always comes before dusk in Africa, a moment when the day exhales and the world feels soft again. Women stood by the well, laughter tumbling from their lips as they filled calabashes with water. Barefoot children darted between them like restless birds, chasing each other through the dust, their giggles rising like a song. Smoke curled lazily from cooking fires, carrying the familiar scents of roasted yam and palm oil stew. Everything seemed the same, and yet, for one returning soul, everything was about to change. Down the narrow red earth road walked a woman with quiet steps, her shadow stretching long behind her. Mama Ebony. Her wrapper, though slightly faded from travel, was neatly tied. A white scarf covered her braided hair, and her hands gripped the handles of two small suitcases that had seen the world beyond this place. Her gait was strong but slowed by the weight of memory. Each sound, a rooster's crow, a child's cry, the slap of pestle and mortar, stirred something deep inside her. She had dreamt of these sounds every night for 5 long years. Her eyes moved across the familiar huts, the mango trees, the fields beyond the hill where she once sang to her children as they played. Everything called her name, yet everything felt distant, like an echo from another life. The last time she walked this road, she had been waving goodbye to her husband and her 2 small children, promising to return with money, gifts, and a better life for them all. She had boarded that bus with tears in her eyes, her husband's hand raised in farewell, her little ones crying and clutching at her skirt. She remembered whispering to herself, "One day when I come back they will be proud of me." Now that day had come. As she entered the heart of the village, voices began to stir. A group of young men mending a bicycle paused, glancing up with curiosity. One of them frowned, then whispered to another, "Wait, is that not Ebony? The one who left for London?" The other nodded slowly, disbelief flickering across his face. "It can't be, they said she was never coming back." The whispers followed her like the wind, a trail of wonder and gossip spreading before her. But Ebony didn't mind. Her heart was beating too fast, too full. She smiled faintly, half to herself, half to the land. Every corner of the village was a piece of her story: the old palm tree that once held her children's swing, the compound where she borrowed salt and laughter from her neighbor, the stream where she used to wash her clothes and her worries. She had missed all of it. Even the red dust on her sandals felt like a blessing. She stopped for a moment at the edge of the main square, resting her suitcases beside her feet. The evening breeze brushed her face, carrying faint music from a distant drum. She closed her eyes. 5 years of cold mornings abroad, of cleaning houses that were not her own, of counting coins to send back home, all melted away in that single breath. She was home. Her eyes opened again, glistening. The world around her seemed both familiar and strange, like a picture slightly out of focus. She wondered how tall her son Kola had grown, how her daughter Tommy would look now. Would they still remember her voice, her scent, her songs? A pang of fear flickered through her chest, the fear that love, if left too long, might fade like old paint. But she pushed the thought aside. A mother's love does not die, it waits. She lifted her suitcases again and began walking toward her compound. The road was longer than she remembered, or maybe her legs had grown weary from years of distance. Along the way, a few old faces appeared. Mama Chica waving hesitantly from her veranda, Baba Fatai leaning on his walking stick with raised brows. Their eyes held both warmth and surprise. Ebony greeted them with a soft smile, her voice trembling with emotion. "It has been too long," she said, though what she truly meant was, "I have missed you all more than words can say." The sun dipped lower, painting everything in amber and memory. Children stared at her curiously, whispering to one another. Somewhere a dog barked, and a goat bleated as if to announce her return. Every sound seemed to welcome her, yet beneath the beauty of that homecoming, there was a shadow she couldn't name, a silence that hummed between the laughter and the wind. Still she walked on, her heart steady, her faith unbroken. The house she had built with her husband's hands awaited her at the end of the path. In her mind, she pictured her children running out to meet her, their smiles wide, their arms open. That thought alone made her chest swell with joy. As the last light of the sun kissed the rooftops, Ebony reached the corner where her compound came into view. She paused, taking it in, the same gate, the same walls, though older, quieter. Her eyes softened, and a tear rolled down her cheek, half joy, half disbelief. She whispered to herself, "I am home." But as she took her first step toward the gate, the air shifted, a subtle chill beneath the warmth. The village was still watching. Somewhere in her heart, a question rose uninvited. Would home still remember her the way she remembered it? She didn't have the answer. Not yet. But the weight of time, of love, of sacrifice, followed her through that gate like a shadow. The road that led to Ebony's compound had once been neat and well-trodden, swept each morning by her daughter and sprinkled with water to keep the dust down. Now it looked untended, the grass rising tall and brown on either side like silent sentinels guarding a secret. The fence she and her husband had painted blue before she left had faded into a tired gray, and streaks of rust ran like old tears down the metal gate. She stopped for a moment, tightening her grip on the handles of her suitcases. 5 years was a long time, she reminded herself. Time could age a place just as it aged a person. Still, the sight left a dull ache in her chest. The evening light softened everything it touched, but it could not hide the cracks along the wall or the way the hinges of the gate sagged on one side. The house had been her pride, proof that her family was building a better life. She had pictured it growing more beautiful in her absence, with the laughter of her children echoing through its rooms. Instead, it looked weary, like it had stopped waiting for her. She pushed the gate gently. It gave a low, rusty groan that startled her. She stepped inside, her shoes brushing against dry leaves scattered across the compound. The smell was familiar, earthy, mixed with smoke from a neighbor's cooking fire, but something else lingered beneath it, a faint mustiness that spoke of neglect. She looked at the veranda where she used to sit at night with her husband, drinking tea and talking about dreams. The chair they had carved together was gone. Only a broken stool leaned against the wall. As she set her suitcases down, she saw movement from the corner of her eye, a young woman balancing a basin of laundry on her head, walking past the fence. Ebony's heart lifted for a moment. Perhaps she was one of the neighbors she knew, someone who could tell her how her children had been. She smiled warmly and called out, "Good evening, my dear." The young woman froze, turned her head slightly, then looked away. Her steps quickened. Ebony frowned. Don't you recognize me?" she asked, half laughing, half pleading. The woman pretended not to hear. Only when she was halfway down the path did she mumble a faint greeting and vanish behind the mango trees. Ebony's smile lingered, but the warmth behind it began to fade. People in the village were usually welcoming, especially when someone returned from abroad. She tried to reason with herself. Maybe the girl was shy, maybe she didn't know her. But there had been something in her eyes, a flicker of discomfort, almost guilt. She brushed the thought aside and turned back to the house. The front door was closed, though not locked. She could hear faint sounds inside, perhaps a chair scraping, the shuffle of footsteps. Her pulse quickened. She imagined her children moving about, unaware that their mother was at the gate. The thought filled her with giddy anticipation. She smoothed her wrapper, adjusted her scarf, and took a deep breath. She had pictured this reunion countless times. In her mind, Kola would be tall and broad-shouldered now, his face shining with pride. Tommy would have grown into a graceful young woman, maybe even helping her prepare dinner. They would run into her arms. She would hold them and forget every lonely night she had spent abroad. The wind picked up, whispering through the dry leaves. Somewhere a door slammed and a dog barked in the distance. The air felt heavier now, as though the compound itself was holding its breath. She looked at the windows. The curtains were drawn, though faint light glowed from within. Ebony took a step closer and noticed more details that troubled her. The flower bed where she once planted hibiscus was bare, filled only with weeds. The clay pot by the door, where her husband used to keep water for guests, lay cracked in two. Even the walls bore strange new marks, like someone had scratched initials into the plaster. Something was off. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to smile again. "It's been 5 years," she whispered to herself. "Of course things have changed." But the words felt hollow, like a song sung to calm a child. She reached out and touched the doorframe, her fingers tracing the old nail marks from where her husband once hung charms for protection. "My babies must be inside," she murmured softly, her voice trembling with both excitement and uncertainty. Her reflection stared back at her faintly in the glass. Older, wearier, eyes that had seen foreign cities and nights of longing. She barely recognized herself. Maybe her children wouldn't recognize her either. The thought cut through her like a cold breeze. Still, she smiled because that was what mothers did. They smiled through fear, through exhaustion, through heartbreak. She gathered her suitcases, squared her shoulders, and took one last look around the compound. The village beyond was beginning to dim as dusk slipped quietly into night. Shadows lengthened across the ground, and a bird called out from a nearby tree, its cry echoing like a warning. Ebony ignored the unease tightening in her stomach. All she could think of was the warmth of her children's arms, the sound of their laughter filling the quiet rooms again. She stepped up to the door and lifted her hand to knock, her heart pounding with hope. But before her knuckles touched the wood, she hesitated. The faint sound of laughter drifted from inside, strange laughter, not the voices she knew. For a moment she froze, her hands suspended in the air. Then she smiled again, a little shakier this time, and whispered to the door as if it could hear her. "I'm home, my children. Mama has come back." And with that, she knocked, once softly, her heart suspended between joy and the first tremor of something she could not yet name. The knock echoed through the house, soft at first, then again firmer this time. The sound seemed to stir the air, to wake something that had long been sleeping. Inside, footsteps shuffled, slow and uncertain. Ebony's heart thudded in her chest. She gripped her suitcases tightly, a small smile tugging at her lips, her eyes shining with hope. Any second now her children would open that door. She imagined their faces lighting up, their voices shouting, "Mama! Mama!" She had waited for this moment through countless nights of loneliness, through cold foreign winters, through tears shed into her pillow. The latch clicked. The door creaked open. A young man stood in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, his face partly shadowed by the dim light from inside. His eyes widened, and for a long, trembling heartbeat, he just stared at her as though he were seeing a ghost. Then his lips parted, his voice breaking. Mama?" Ebony's smile bloomed instantly, tears welling in her eyes. "Kola," she breathed. "My son, my first son." She dropped her suitcases and opened her arms. But Kola didn't move. He stood frozen, his eyes darting behind him, his chest rising and falling too fast. Something flickered in his expression. Disbelief, confusion, even fear. Before Ebony could speak again, a woman's voice floated from inside the house, casual and unhurried. "Who's that at the door, Kola?" The voice hit Ebony like a slap, not because of its tone but because of its familiarity. It was the kind of voice that carried ownership, comfort, belonging. A woman's voice that shouldn't have been there. Kola hesitated, his hand tightening on the doorframe. "It's someone," he muttered. Ebony tilted her head, her smile faltering. "Someone?" she repeated softly. "Kola, don't you recognize your own mother?" Before he could answer, the woman appeared, stepping into the doorway behind him. She was tall and full-bodied, her skin smooth and gleaming in the lantern light. Around her waist was tied a bright Ankara wrapper. Ebony's breath caught in her throat. It was her wrapper. The very same pattern she had bought in Lagos before traveling abroad, the one she had loved for its red and gold flowers. Seeing it on another woman felt like a wound she couldn't name. The stranger blinked in surprise, then her eyes narrowed slightly. "You're Ebony?" she asked as if the name itself tasted strange. Ebony straightened her back, forcing a smile though her stomach was twisting. "Yes, I am Ebony, the mother of this house, the mother of these children." Her eyes moved past the woman, searching the room. "Where is my daughter? Where is Tommy?" As if summoned by her name, a slender girl appeared from behind the curtain, 17, maybe 18 now, wearing a simple dress and a wary expression. Her face was so familiar it made Ebony's knees weak. The same high cheekbones, the same almond eyes. But her smile, her daughter's bright, dimpled smile, was gone. "Tommy," Ebony whispered, her voice trembling. "My baby girl?" For a moment Tommy didn't move. She stood there, staring as if she couldn't believe her own eyes. Then slowly she stepped forward, her lips parting but no words coming out. Ebony dropped to her knees, opening her arms, waiting for the warmth of her daughter's embrace. But Tommy stopped halfway. Her hands fidgeted at her sides. She looked back at the strange woman, who gave a small, tight nod. Only then did Tommy murmur, "Mama?" Ebony's arms lowered slightly, the air growing heavy between them. That single word, "Mama," should have been enough to fill her heart, but it felt hollow, uncertain. Kola cleared his throat. "Mama, we didn't know you'd come back." His voice was awkward, heavy with things unsaid. "We thought." "You thought what?" Ebony asked quietly, her eyes flicking from him to the woman behind him. He shifted uneasily, glancing at the floor. "We thought, maybe you weren't coming back. It's been years. No letters, no messages for a long time." "That's not true," she said sharply, then caught herself and softened her tone. "I sent letters. I sent money. I wrote every month. Didn't you receive them?" Kola hesitated. Tommy looked down. The strange woman, now clearly the keeper of this house, stepped forward slightly and spoke in a calm, almost dismissive tone. "A lot has changed since you left, Ebony. The world moves on. The children grew. We managed." Ebony's eyes darted to her again. And who are you? The woman smiled faintly, though there was no warmth in it. Ayabizi. I'm the one who's been taking care of them. Silence fell between them. The only sound was the night insects humming outside and the faint creak of the lantern flame. Ebony looked from one face to another, her son avoiding her eyes, her daughter trembling, this strange woman standing tall in her own home. The joy that had carried her all the way from the airport to this door drained out of her like water from a cracked pot. Kola finally spoke again, his voice low. Mama, please, come in. You must be tired from your journey. She nodded slowly, stepping into the house. Her eyes swept over everything. The chairs moved around, the old family portraits missing, her husband's carved walking stick gone from the corner. The tablecloth was new, the curtains strange. Her home, once vibrant with her spirit, felt unfamiliar, rearranged, claimed. She turned to Kola, her voice soft but quivering. Did you change everything? Kola glanced at Ayabizi. We just fixed things. Some of the old things were broken. Her gaze dropped to the floor, to the mat she had woven years ago, now frayed, half hidden beneath a new rug. Tommy stood close now, tears shimmering in her eyes but her arms still at her sides. She wanted to speak, to move closer, but fear held her back. Ebony could feel it, the distance between them, not of space but of years poisoned by silence. The woman, Ayabizi, spoke again, her tone light but firm. It's good you're back, Ebony. Maybe you can rest a bit before we talk. Things aren't the same as before. Ebony looked at her son again, but he kept his head bowed. Her daughter turned away, pretending to adjust the curtain. The room seemed to shrink around her, the warmth she had carried in her chest flickering like a candle in the wind. She smiled weakly, forcing herself to speak through the tightness in her throat. Yes, I should rest. But inside, her heart was heavy. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. And though her children stood before her, alive and grown, the space between them felt colder than any distance she had ever crossed. That night, as the lantern light trembled on the walls, Ebony realized with a quiet, aching certainty. She had come home, but home was no longer hers. The next morning, light crept into the compound softly, sliding through cracks in the curtains and glinting off the tin kettle on the hearth. Ebony sat on the small stool near the doorway, her travel bag still unopened beside her. The room smelled faintly of palm oil and smoke, but the scent was no longer the one she remembered. It carried someone else's rhythm, someone else's hand. She had slept barely at all. Every creak of the floorboards had felt like an accusation, every whisper of the wind like a reminder that something in her home had shifted beyond her reach. From the back room came the low hum of a woman's voice, Ayabizi, singing to herself as she cooked. The tune was cheerful, confident, like someone perfectly at home in that kitchen. Ebony recognized the melody. It was one of her own songs, one she used to sing while braiding Tommy's hair. Hearing it in another woman's mouth was almost unbearable. She rose slowly, smoothing the folds of her wrapper. The furniture in the sitting room caught her eye. The sofa had been moved to a different corner, the family photographs rearranged. Her wedding portrait was gone. In its place, a framed picture of Kola and Tommy stood beside one of Ayabizi holding a tray of fruit, smiling proudly. The sight made Ebony's heart twist. When Ayabizi finally emerged, she was carrying a steaming pot of porridge. Her face glowed with the easy confidence of someone who belonged. Good morning, she said, setting the pot on the table. You must be hungry. I made breakfast for everyone. Ebony nodded stiffly, her throat tight. Good morning, she murmured. Tommy appeared next, her hair neatly plaited, her eyes darting nervously between the two women. Good morning, Mama, she said softly, but Ebony couldn't tell if the greeting was meant for her or for Ayabizi. Before she could ask, Kola entered, already dressed for the day. Good morning, Ma, he said to Ayabizi first, then hesitated before turning to his mother. Good morning, Mama. The word fell from his lips differently when he said it to each of them, warm for one, awkward for the other. Ebony felt it in her chest like a small cut. Ayabizi poured porridge into bowls with a smile. Come and eat, everyone. Don't let the food get cold. Ebony sat, though her appetite was gone. The children joined her hesitantly. For a while, only the sounds of spoons clinking filled the room. She looked down at her bowl, then up at Kola. So tell me, she said softly. How long has she been here? Kola paused, his spoon halfway to his mouth. Tommy lowered her gaze. It was Ayabizi who answered. It's been 2 years now, she said smoothly. After your husband passed, I came to help. The children were alone. They needed someone to care for them. Ebony's hand froze on the table. My husband passed? Her voice trembled on the last word. Kola shifted uncomfortably. Yes, Mama. It was sudden. He got sick. Ebony pressed her palm to her chest. And no one told me? Tommy's voice was barely a whisper. We didn't know how to reach you. We thought you knew. Silence spread across the table like spilled oil. Ebony closed her eyes, the ache in her heart growing heavy and sharp. She had imagined her return being filled with laughter, with reunion. Instead, she was learning her husband's death from the lips of a stranger wearing her wrapper. When she opened her eyes again, she forced herself to smile faintly. So, you've been helping them, she said, her voice brittle but polite. Yes, Ayabizi replied, sitting straighter. I did what needed to be done. I kept the house, made sure they stayed in school, made sure they had food. People were talking when their father died. Some even wanted to take the children away. I didn't allow it. She looked directly at Ebony, her gaze calm but edged. You left and I stayed. Someone had to stand for them. The words struck like stones. Ebony swallowed, trying to find her breath. I left to build a better life for them, she said quietly. Every day I worked for their sake. Every coin I sent home was for this house, for their future. Kola looked up, guilt flickering across his face. We received the money for a while, Mama. Then one day it stopped coming. Ebony's voice broke. It didn't stop. I sent it. Every month. The air went thick. Ayabizi gave a small sigh, pretending sympathy. Maybe something went wrong with the post. These things happen. But don't worry now, everything is fine. Fine. The word tasted bitter to Ebony. She looked around again, at the wall she had painted, now dulled by someone else's touch, at the curtains she didn't buy, at the floor swept clean by another woman's hands. It was as though her spirit had been scrubbed out of the home, replaced by someone else's. When the meal ended, Ayabizi stood and began clearing the table. Kola, please fetch water from the well, she said. He obeyed instantly. Tommy swept the veranda. The girl rose quietly, nodding. Their obedience was smooth, practiced. Not the reluctant gestures of children helping a temporary visitor, but the rhythm of those who had long accepted her as mistress of the house. Ebony sat still, watching. Something inside her cracked open. She realized, with a slow and suffocating pain, that her children had another mama, now. When Tommy returned, she found Ebony staring at the wall, her face blank but her eyes glistening. Are you all right? The girl asked softly. Ebony forced a small smile. Yes, my dear. I'm just remembering. Outside, the village hummed with life. But behind the compound walls, tension hung like thick smoke. The neighbors, curious as ever, whispered from their compounds. They say she came back without warning, one woman murmured. And now she finds another woman ruling her house. I heard, another replied, that Ayabizi is even married to the son now. Or maybe to the spirit of the dead husband. Who knows? Their laughter carried faintly on the breeze. Inside, Ebony could almost feel their voices pressing against her. She stood slowly, walked to the corner where her husband's chair once stood, and touched the empty space. The echo of his laughter came back to her for a fleeting second, then was gone. I will not quarrel, she whispered to herself. Not yet. When night fell, the house glowed with the orange light of kerosene lamps. The family sat together, Ayabizi in her place by the table, Kola beside her, Tommy leaning against the wall. Ebony sat alone near the doorway, her hands folded in her lap. She smiled when they spoke to her, nodded when they asked questions, but her mind was far away, trapped between what was and what had become. Her eyes lingered on her son's face, then on her daughter's. She had imagined coming home to warmth, to love, to belonging. Instead, she had returned to find a stranger in her place, a woman wearing her wrapper, eating from her bowls, answering to her name. That night, as crickets sang and the moon rose over the village, Ebony lay awake on her mat. Every breath felt heavy, every memory sharp. She realized with a painful clarity that love, left untended, can be rewritten. And as she listened to the house settling into sleep, she wondered how long it would take to reclaim what was once hers, or if it was already gone forever. The memory returned like a dream wrapped in sunlight, soft at the edges, painful at the core. It was 5 years ago, the morning she boarded the bus that would take her from the village to Lagos, then onward to the airport. The sky had been pale blue, the kind of morning that smelled of hope and wet earth. She remembered the way her children clung to her wrapper, Kola's small hands gripping tightly as though his strength alone could keep her from leaving. Tommy had been only 12, tears streaking her cheeks as she tried to be brave. Ebony had crouched down to meet their eyes. My babies, she'd whispered, cupping their faces. Mama is going to work. I will come back with enough money for your schooling, for new clothes, for this house. You'll see. It won't be long. Her husband, Adewale, had stood behind them, tall and steady as always. His voice was calm, even though she could see the worry hiding in his eyes. Go, Ebony. I will keep them safe. Don't let fear stop you. She had smiled, though her heart felt heavy. I will send money every month. And letters. You must write me too. We will, he said. Every market day I will make them write something small. She had kissed him then, the kind of kiss that carried both love and goodbye. When the bus began to rumble, her eyes had filled with tears, but she waved until the children were only tiny shapes in the dust behind her. The first months abroad had been a blur of cold weather and harder work than she had imagined. London had felt like another world, the gray skies, the silence of strangers, the endless hours in the small cleaning company that barely paid her enough to live. But every month she sent money home through a man she trusted, writing letters with shaking hands after long shifts. Tell my babies Mama loves them, she would write. Tell Adewale I am counting the days. Sometimes she would imagine them sitting by the fire, reading her words aloud. It was that image that kept her alive through lonely winters and nights spent scrubbing empty offices. For years the letters came back, short, simple, full of life. We miss you, Mama. Tommy won the dance competition. The house looks good now. Papa says the goats are strong this season. Then one day the letter stopped. At first she thought the post was slow. Then she worried maybe they had changed address or the money had not reached them. She went to the post office often, asking questions no one could answer. She called once from a borrowed phone, but the line went dead. She tried again and again until even the operator sighed and said the number no longer existed. Loneliness began to wrap itself around her like an old shawl. She still sent money, still wrote, but with each passing month, doubt grew heavier. Sometimes, in her tiny rented room, she would stare out the window at the city lights and whisper to herself, I am doing this for them. She imagined walking back into her village one day, her children running into her arms, Adewale smiling at the door. That dream became her heartbeat, the only thing that made the long, silent years bearable. But now, sitting in the same house that once echoed with their laughter, Ebony realized how fragile dreams could be. She had crossed oceans for them, and in that distance something precious had slipped away. The promise she made beneath that blue morning sky still echoed in her heart, but the home she returned to no longer recognized it. The afternoon sun hung low and heavy over the village, its light bleeding into gold and amber across the dusty path. Ebony walked slowly, her feet dragging slightly, the hem of her wrapper brushing against the earth. Every sound, the chatter of women pounding yam, the laughter of children chasing a goat, the cry of a distant rooster, felt strange, like echoes of a world she once knew but no longer belonged to. She turned down the narrow lane that led to Mama Chica's compound. Once they had been inseparable, neighbors, friends, sisters in everything but blood. They had shared food, secrets, and tears during childbirths and market quarrels. If anyone would speak the truth, it would be Mama Chica. When Ebony reached the compound, she paused at the entrance. The smell of smoked fish drifted from the kitchen hut. Mama Chica was sitting outside weaving a mat. Her face lifted at the sound of footsteps, but when her eyes met Ebony's, the mat slipped from her fingers. For a heartbeat, her expression was joy, then hesitation shadowed it. Ebony, she whispered, standing slowly. Ah, my sister. Ebony smiled faintly and opened her arms. They embraced, and for a moment it felt like coming home. But when they pulled apart, Mama Chica's gaze darted toward the road, as if afraid someone might see. You came back, she said, voice trembling with surprise. We didn't know you would return. I didn't tell anyone, Ebony replied softly. I wanted to surprise them. My children. She paused, studying her friend's uneasy face. But things have changed. Mama Chica lowered her eyes. Come inside, she murmured. Let us talk. They sat together on the woven mats, a calabash of water between them. The room smelled of palm oil and dried herbs. For a long time neither spoke. The silence grew heavy, broken only by the hum of flies against the window. Finally, Ebony said quietly, I heard that my husband is gone. Is it true? Mama Chica looked up sharply, then away. Ah, my sister, she began, her tone careful. I wanted to write you, but we did not have your address anymore. It happened 2 years ago. Fever took him. It was quick. Ebony's fingers clenched around her wrapper. She forced herself to nod, even as her heart seemed to crack a little more. And after he died? Another pause. A deep sigh. That woman, Ayabizi, she came soon after. She said your husband had promised her a place to stay, that she was helping with the children before he passed. Nobody was sure what to believe, but she settled in. She cooked, cleaned, helped the children. Ebony's jaw tightened. Helped? She repeated softly. Mama Chica shifted uncomfortably. At first, yes. The villagers pitied your children. Cola was young but proud, Tommy still small. Everyone thought it was good that someone cared for them. But, she hesitated again, her fingers twisting in her lap. Ebony leaned forward. But what? Mama Chica glanced toward the doorway, lowering her voice. People say she changed after some months. She began controlling everything. The house, the money that came from abroad, even who the children spoke to. Cola became quiet. He stopped coming to the youth meetings. And that girl Tommy. What about Tommy? She is strong, Mama Chica said softly, but she's been seen crying more than once. Aya Beezy treats her harshly, always scolding her, making her do all the housework. Some say the woman slaps her when no one is around. When I tried to visit once, she told me not to interfere in her family matters. Ebony's breath caught. My daughter? She whispered. My Tommy? Mama Chica nodded. Yes. But the girl hides it. She smiles in public. That woman has a way of twisting words, making everyone think she is the savior. Even your son seems to defend her now. People have started calling her Mama of the house. The words cut deeper than any knife. Ebony's hands trembled, her fingernails pressing into her palms until they hurt. She turned her face slightly, blinking back tears. And no one told me, she murmured. We didn't know where you were, Mama Chica said helplessly. And the woman, she told everyone you stopped sending money, that you forgot them. Ebony looked up sharply, anger sparking behind her grief. Lies, she hissed. Every month I sent it. Every single month. I know, Mama Chica said gently. I believed you would never abandon them. But the others, they only saw what she showed them. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. The sounds of the village seemed far away now, faint, unreal. Ebony stared at the wall, her vision blurred by tears she refused to let fall. In her chest, sorrow slowly hardened into something else, something steady, sharp, and alive. When she finally spoke again, her voice was low but strong. She has taken everything, my home, my children's trust, even my name. But she will not keep them. Mama Chica's eyes widened slightly. Ebony, please be careful. That woman has power now. People listen to her. Don't act in anger. I am not angry, Ebony said, though her hands still trembled. I am awake. For 5 years I worked so they could live well. For 5 years I dreamed of coming home. And now I am here, and I will not run away again. She rose to her feet, lifting her chin. The fading sun poured through the open doorway, painting her face in warm light. The same strength that had once carried her across oceans was returning, piece by piece. I will stay here, she said quietly, but each word struck the air with iron resolve. They will remember who I am. Mama Chica stared at her, seeing not the weary traveler who had returned in silence, but the woman who had once commanded her home with love and fire. Slowly she nodded. Then may the ancestors guide you, my sister, she whispered. As Ebony stepped back into the golden evening, the world around her seemed to hum with quiet expectation. The dust rose behind her footsteps the same way it had the day she left, but this time she was not going anywhere. This time she was coming back to claim what was hers. The night air was thick and restless, the kind that carried the scent of rain before the first drop ever fell. Clouds gathered low over the village, rolling like dark spirits across the sky. The crickets had gone silent, as though even they sensed something was about to break. Inside the compound, the glow of a single kerosene lamp flickered against the walls, throwing long, uneasy shadows. Ebony stood in the doorway of her old room, her hand resting on the frame. Her heart thudded, slow and deliberate. The room smelled faintly of soap and palm oil, but under that, yes, beneath that, she could still catch the ghost of her old perfume trapped somewhere in the wooden walls. Her eyes traced the familiar details. The small crack near the window, the curtain she had sewn herself, now faded. But the bedspread was new, bright and floral, not hers. A woman's wrapper hung from the chair. She turned slowly. I will sleep here tonight, she said quietly, her voice steady but firm. From the other room came the sound of laughter that died too quickly, the laughter of someone pretending not to listen. Aya Beezy appeared in the doorway, her expression caught between disbelief and defiance. She had changed into a clean wrapper, her hair tied back neatly. Pardon? She asked, her tone deceptively calm. Ebony lifted her chin. I said I will sleep in my room. The one I built. The one I left behind. For a heartbeat, silence filled the space between them. Then Ayabizi smiled, slow and sharp. Ah, I see. You mean my room. The words hit like a slap. Your room? Abani repeated softly. Yes, Ayabizi said, stepping closer. For 2 years this has been my space. I take care of this home, I raise these children, I sleep under this roof. You left Abani. You went to find a better life and you forgot this one. The lamp flickered as the wind moaned outside. Abani's eyes darkened. I forgot nothing, she said. Every coin I earned I sent here. Every prayer I made was for this house, for my children. Ayabizi laughed quietly, bitterly. Then perhaps your prayers got lost on the way, just like your letters. Because we never saw them. We only saw hunger and tears. We saw a man die and a woman step forward to fill the emptiness you left. Lightning flashed through the window, bathing both women in pale blue light. For a moment they looked like two halves of the same storm. One born of sacrifice, the other of survival. Kola appeared then, barefoot, his face drawn with tension. Please, he said quickly, stepping between them. It's late. Mama Abani, the guest room is ready. Just for tonight. Abani cut him off. Guest room? She repeated, her voice cracking on the words. She stared at him, tears rising behind her anger. Is that what I am now? A guest in my own home? Kola swallowed hard, guilt flickering in his eyes. Mama, it's not like that. I don't want trouble. Trouble? Abani took a step forward. Trouble is when a woman buries her husband and no one tells her. Trouble is when she returns home and finds another woman sleeping in her bed. Mama, please. Tommy's voice came from the corner, small and trembling. She stood there clutching the edge of her wrapper, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Don't fight. Please don't. Abani turned toward her daughter, her heart twisting. I'm not fighting, my child. I am only asking for what belongs to me. But Ayabizi's voice rose above the thunder outside. Belongs to you? She snapped. You talk of belonging as if this house waited for you all these years. You left your husband, your children, your home, and now you return expecting the world to freeze in your absence. Abani's jaw tightened. I left to build their future. And yet you missed their suffering, Ayabizi shot back. You missed your husband's last breath. You missed your daughter's tears. You think money replaces a mother? You think distance is love. The words struck deep, but Abani refused to flinch. And what are you then? She whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. A replacement? A shadow pretending to be light. Kola stepped closer, his voice breaking. Enough, please. Both of you. But the storm outside had already begun. Thunder cracked so loudly that the windows shuddered. The first drops of rain splashed through the open doorway, cool and heavy. The smell of wet earth filled the room. Ayabizi crossed her arms, standing her ground. You can stay in this house, she said coldly, but not in this room. This is my space now. You left it behind the day you chose to leave us. Abani stared at her for a long moment. Her breath came slow and steady, but her hands trembled at her sides. Then she said very softly, This house has seen my laughter, my pain, my blood. You cannot erase me from it. Then where were you when your children needed you? The question landed like thunder itself. The silence that followed was unbearable. Kola looked down, tears threatening to spill. Tommy covered her face, sobbing quietly in the corner. Outside, the rain fell harder, slamming against the roof like angry hands. Lightning flashed again, illuminating Abani's face. Her sorrow, her shame, her fury, all tangled into one. Finally she turned away. I will sleep in the guest room, she said quietly. For tonight. Ayabizi gave a small, triumphant smile. That's best for everyone. But Abani didn't look at her. She walked past Kola and Tommy, her eyes fixed on the dark hallway ahead. The storm roared, wind howling through the open windows, but she moved like a spirit untouched by it. She paused at the doorway of the guest room, then spoke without turning. You may take my room, she said softly, but you will never take my place. Then she closed the door behind her. In the silence that followed, Kola sank onto a chair, his head in his hands. Tommy stood frozen, tears sliding down her cheeks. And Ayabizi stood in the middle of the room, breathing heavily as thunder rolled across the sky, the house itself seeming to tremble under the weight of what had been said. Inside the small room, Abani sat on the edge of the bed, staring into the dark. The rain drummed steadily on the roof, each drop like a heartbeat reminding her she was still here, still fighting, still standing. Her face was wet, but not from rain. Outside, lightning split the sky once more, bright and fierce, as if the heavens themselves bore witness to her pain, and her quiet, unbroken resolve. The morning came wrapped in mist and silence, the storm's memory still clinging to the air. The earth was damp, glistening under the pale light of dawn. Birds sang cautiously as if testing the calm after the night's rage. Inside the compound, a soft rhythm of water echoed, splash, scrub, rinse, repeat. Ebony knelt beside a wooden basin, sleeves rolled up, washing a pile of clothes that weren't even hers. Her wrapper was tied tightly around her waist, her hands moving methodically through the cold water. Soap bubbles drifted away like fragile ghosts. Her face was calm, though the exhaustion beneath her eyes told another story. When Tommy stepped out of the house, she paused at the sight. For a long moment she just stood there watching her mother's hands working quietly, hands that once tucked her into bed, braided her hair, cooked her favorite soup. Now those same hands washed clothes in the yard of the home that no longer welcomed her. "Mama," she whispered. Ebony looked up, smiling faintly. "Good morning, my child." Tommy hesitated before walking closer. "You shouldn't be doing this," she said softly. "It's not your job." Ebony wrung out a piece of cloth, her arms glistening with water. "Work is never a shame, my daughter. It reminds me I am still alive." The girl's lips trembled. She knelt beside her mother, reaching for a shirt but stopping halfway. Her eyes filled with tears she couldn't hold back any longer. "Mama, I have to tell you something." Ebony looked at her, concerned. "What is it?" Tommy swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "She lied to us. All this time she lied." Ebony froze, her hands still in the water. "What do you mean?" Tommy's tears spilled freely now. "Your letters. Your money. Everything you sent, we never saw them. And she burned your letters. She said you forgot us, that you started a new life abroad. She told Kola not to speak your name again." The sound of her words seemed to slice through the quiet morning. Ebony's hands trembled, the soap slipping from her fingers. "She burned them?" she whispered as if trying to make sense of it. Tommy nodded, sobbing harder. "I found out last year. I saw her throw some papers into the fire. When I asked, she slapped me and said it was none of my business. She said you abandoned us, that you never cared." Ebony's eyes filled with tears that refused to fall at first. Her breath came unevenly, her chest rising and falling like a tide. "And you believed her?" she asked softly. Tommy shook her head desperately. "I wanted to believe you didn't forget. But she made everything sound so real. Kola believed her too. He said you must have found a new family in London. He was angry for years." Ebony reached out then, her wet hands touching her daughter's cheeks. "Oh, my child," she whispered, her voice breaking completely. "You were just a girl. How could you have known?" Tommy buried her face in her mother's lap, her sobs shaking her small frame. "I'm sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry." Ebony bent forward, wrapping her arms around her daughter tightly. For the first time since she returned, she let the tears come. They rolled down her face, mixing with the drops of water still clinging to her skin. "No, my child," she said, her voice trembling. "You have nothing to be sorry for. I am here now. No more lies will live in this house." They stayed like that for a long while, mother and daughter holding each other amid the scent of soap and rain-soaked earth. Around them, the village slowly woke. Roosters crowed, doors creaked open, distant voices murmured. But for Ebony, the world had narrowed to this one truth: her child's tears, her own heart breaking, and the soft rhythm of forgiveness beginning to beat again. When Tommy finally lifted her head, her face streaked with tears, Ebony brushed the hair from her forehead. "You are brave for telling me," she said gently. "Truth is not easy when fear lives in the house." Tommy sniffled. "What will you do now, Mama?" Ebony looked toward the house, her gaze steady, the faint spark of steel glimmering behind her softness. "The truth has been buried for too long," she said. "It's time to dig it out, with my own hands if I must." As she rose, the morning breeze caught the edge of her wrapper, fluttering it like a flag. The sun broke through the clouds, its first light touching her face. She looked both weary and unyielding, like a storm that had learned how to be calm without losing its power. Tommy stood beside her, wiping her eyes. Together they stared at the house, the walls that held both love and deceit, and for the first time, Ebony did not feel like a stranger there. The truth had begun to speak, and in its voice, she could already hear the echo of her name returning to its rightful place. Kola stood behind the cracked doorway, frozen. The sound of his sister's sobs drifted to him like echoes from another lifetime. Every word pierced him. "She burned your letters. She said you abandoned us." His heart thudded painfully. The truth landed with the weight of stones. He had believed Ayabizi. He had defended her. He had resented his own mother. He leaned against the wall, his breath shallow. Images flashed before his eyes, moments he had buried deep. The day Ayabizi took the phone from his hands saying, "Your mother doesn't want to talk right now." The way she sighed dramatically whenever Abony's name was mentioned. The stories she told, that Abony was too busy enjoying life abroad to remember her children. Each memory burned now, shame turning his stomach. He had called that woman Mama, while the one who gave him life scrubbed clothes in the yard like a servant. Kola stepped forward slowly, his legs trembling. Tommy looked up, startled. Abony turned at the sound of his footsteps, her eyes red but calm. For a moment no one spoke. The morning breeze whispered between them, carrying the faint scent of rain and soap. "Mama," Kola's voice broke. "I heard everything." Abony didn't move. Her gaze stayed fixed on him, not angry, not cold, just unbearably still. He swallowed hard. "I didn't know," he said, his words tumbling out. "I swear I didn't know. She told us you left us, that you forgot." Abony's silence made his confession harder. The guilt rose in his chest like a tide. "I was angry," he continued, his voice cracking. "I hated you for years. I thought you chose a new life instead of us. When you came back, I didn't even welcome you. I let her speak to you like you were nothing." He dropped to his knees in the damp earth. "Forgive me, Mama," he whispered. "Please. I was blind." For a long moment Abony said nothing. She simply looked at him, this grown man kneeling before her, shoulders shaking, the boy she had once carried on her back now broken with regret. She reached out slowly, resting a trembling hand on his head. "You are my blood," she said softly. "The river may twist, but it still finds the sea." Kola's breath hitched. Tears streamed down his face as he bowed his head into her palm. Abony knelt beside him and lifted his chin so their eyes met. "What was done cannot be undone, my son," she said. "But the heart that remembers truth is never too late to return home." He nodded, sobbing quietly. "I'll make it right, Mama. I'll protect you now. I'll protect Tommy. I'll tell everyone the truth." Abony smiled faintly, weary but full of grace. "No, my child," she whispered. "The truth does not need to shout. It only needs to stand tall." She helped him rise, and for the first time in years Kola felt small again, not with shame but with humility. The weight he had carried, the lies he had lived under, seemed to loosen and fall away. Tommy came closer, her hand finding his. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. Between them flowed an unspoken understanding. They had both been lost, but their mother's love had found them again. Abony looked between them, her heart swelling with both sorrow and relief. "My children," she said quietly, "a tree may bend in the storm, but it still knows the way back to the sun." As the morning light brightened around them, Kola took his mother's hand and pressed it to his forehead. The yard was still wet, the clothes still unwashed, but the silence between them was no longer heavy. It was healing. For the first time since she stepped off the bus, Abony felt peace, small, fragile, but real. Forgiveness had begun its quiet work, threading its way through the cracks that pain had left behind. By afternoon the news had spread like fire through dry grass. "Mama Abony has returned." The once quiet village buzzed with whispers and sharp tongues. At the market, women paused in their trading to lean close, their voices dropping to eager murmurs. "Did you hear? She came back from London. They say she found another woman in her house." "Ah, but that woman Ayabizi, she took care of those children." "Care or control? There's a difference, my sister." By sunset, the village elder, Baba Olojo, sent word that there would be a meeting beneath the great baobab tree. "Let peace return to our compound," he declared. But everyone knew, peace was not so easily restored. When Abony arrived, she carried herself with quiet grace, her wrapper plain, her head high. Kola and Tommy walked beside her, their faces solemn. Ayabizi was already there, standing proudly with folded arms, her face set in defiance. Around them villagers formed a wide circle, curious, tense, waiting for drama. Baba Olojo cleared his throat. "We are gathered," he began, "because the winds in this family's house are not blowing straight. Let us hear both sides before the ancestors." Ayabizi stepped forward first. "I will speak," she said, her voice strong. "When this woman left, she left her husband and children. She went to chase money across the sea. Who stayed? Who cooked for these children? Who washed their clothes, nursed their fevers, buried their father?" She pointed at herself. "Me. I did. I kept this home alive when she chose to forget it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, Others frowned. Ebony stood still, her expression unreadable. When the elder motioned to her, she stepped forward slowly, the earth crunching beneath her bare feet. "I did not come here to fight," she said softly. Her voice carried, not loud but steady enough that every ear turned toward her. "I left this village to give my children a future. Every coin I earned abroad I sent home. Every night I prayed for them. I did not abandon them, I trusted their father and the people around them to keep them safe." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the faces in the circle, people she had known since childhood. "But I returned to find my husband's grave, my letters burned, and my name turned into a curse inside my own home." The murmurs grew louder now, some in shock, others in shame. Aya Bizi shifted uneasily. "You think you can come and take everything back?" she spat. "You left. You lost your right." Ebony turned to her slowly, her tone still calm. "A mother does not lose her right, Aya Bizi. She may be gone, but her heart remains planted where her children sleep." Silence fell. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. She continued, her eyes glistening but her voice unwavering. "I thank you for feeding them when I was gone. But love does not erase lies. A house built on deceit may stand tall, but it trembles when truth knocks." Baba Olojo nodded gravely. "Truth has spoken," he said. "And it has the strength of water, soft but it washes all things clean." Around the circle villagers began to murmur again, but this time the tone had changed. Some looked at Ebony with new respect, others whispered apologies under their breath. Even those who had doubted her felt the quiet power of her words. Ebony bowed her head slightly to the elder, then turned to leave. No one stopped her. No one dared. As she walked away, Kola and Tommy followed closely behind. The evening light painted their shadows long on the red earth. 3 figures walking together again, not broken but mending. Behind them the crowd slowly dispersed, still murmuring. She spoke with truth. She spoke like a queen. And in that moment, Mama Ebony reclaimed not just her home but her name. 2 mornings after the gathering, while cleaning the house, Tommy called out softly, "Mama, come look." She had been sweeping beneath the old wooden bed in Ebony's former room when her broom hit something hard, the faint thud of metal. She knelt, pulling out a small rusted trunk, covered in dust and spiderwebs. Ebony froze when she saw it. Her heart skipped a beat. "I remember this," she whispered. "I left it before I traveled. I told your father to keep it safe." Kola helped lift it onto the bed. The lock had weakened with age and snapped easily when he twisted it. As the lid creaked open, the faint scent of old paper and memories filled the air. Inside lay bundles of envelopes tied neatly with fading ribbons, letters, dozens of them, their corners yellowed. Ebony's hands trembled as she untied one bundle. She unfolded a letter and read aloud the words written in her own handwriting. "My dearest children, I miss you more than the morning sun misses the earth." Her voice broke. Tears blurred her vision. Each envelope bore her own name, but stamped in red ink on some were the cruel words, "Returned, address unknown." Others had never been opened. Their seals were still intact, untouched for years. Kola took one, turning it over in disbelief. "Mama, these are yours? You sent these?" "Yes," she whispered. "Every month. I wrote to you, to your father. I sent money, gifts. I waited for replies that never came." A murmur rose from outside. The noise had drawn neighbors who now crowded near the doorway. One old man stepped forward, shaking his head. "We saw Aya Bizi bring letters to the house, but she said they were government papers, nothing important." Gasps erupted. Another woman added, "I remember. She always told us Ebony had stopped writing." The truth spread like wildfire. Faces turned pale, whispers grew sharp and angry. Aya Bizi appeared suddenly, her eyes wide, her hands trembling. "Lies?" she shouted. "You all believe her? I did what I had to do. Those children would have starved." But no one spoke for her this time. Even those who had defended her earlier now looked away. Ebony held up one unopened letter, her voice soft but cutting through the air like a blade. "You burned my name in this house. You fed my children with lies, not love. And now the truth stands where deceit once slept." Aya Bizi's face twisted with rage and humiliation. She turned and ran, screaming curses that scattered into the wind, her footsteps fading down the dusty path. Not a single person followed her. Ebony stood still, her fingers tracing the edges of her old letters. Tommy and Kola moved closer, resting their hands on her shoulders. Around them, the villagers lowered their heads, in shame, in awe, in understanding. In that moment, justice didn't shout. It simply stood tall, like a long silenced drum finding its rhythm again. And though Ebony's eyes still glistened with tears, there was peace in her face, the peace of truth finally unburied. Days passed and the village slowly exhaled. The storm had broken and sunlight began to return. In the mornings, smoke rose once again from Ebony's kitchen. The scent of stew and palm oil drifted through the compound, mingling with laughter, soft, hesitant at first, then freer each day. Tommy hummed as she pounded yam beside her mother. Her hands moved in rhythm, her face bright with a joy long forgotten. Sometimes she caught her mother's gaze and smiled, the kind of smile only a daughter gives when trust has returned. Kola repaired the broken gate, the same one Ebony had noticed on her first night home. Each hammer strike echoed like an apology made tangible, a promise nailed into wood. He worked quietly, but every so often, he'd glance toward his mother and grin shyly. Ebony sat beneath the mango tree watching them both. She felt a gentle ache, not of pain but of healing. The house that once felt haunted by betrayal now breathed with life again. Neighbors passed by and waved, some bringing gifts, a basket of yams, a calabash of palm wine, words of respect. "Mama Ebony," they greeted her. "Your home is bright again." She smiled, her voice calm. "It is not brightness that returns, it is truth." In the evenings the three of them would sit together outside, listening to crickets sing. Kola would tell childhood stories, Tommy would laugh until her eyes sparkled. Ebony would close her eyes and breathe deeply, her heart swelling with gratitude. One night, she spoke softly, her tone carrying the wisdom of her journey. "To rebuild a home," she said, "one must first rebuild trust. Walls and roofs are easy to mend, but hearts," she placed her hand on her chest. "Hearts take patience and love." Tommy leaned her head against her mother's shoulder and Kola sat close, his arm around them both. The moon rose high, silvering the compound. The same house that had once felt heavy with lies now stood open, alive again, filled with laughter, with forgiveness, with belonging. And as the wind rustled the mango leaves above, Ebony looked up at the stars, quiet, bright, eternal, and whispered, "I am home." The night air was soft and heavy with the scent of burning wood. Ebony sat with her children beside a small fire in the courtyard, its orange glow painting their faces with warmth. The moon hung full and clear above, lighting the yard like a watchful guardian. Crickets sang, the wind whispered through the trees, and for the first time in years, their home felt alive again. Tommy rested her head on her mother's lap while Kola poked the fire with a stick, sending sparks swirling into the sky. It was quiet, not the silence of grief or tension but the stillness of peace. Ebony began to speak softly, her voice weaving into the crackle of the flames. "When I was a little girl," she said, "my mother used to tell me stories of women who walked with courage in their hearts. Women who crossed rivers, climbed mountains, and still came home to plant seeds." Tommy looked up, her eyes wide. "Like you, Mama?" Ebony smiled faintly. "Perhaps. But every woman's river is different." She paused, her gaze lost in the firelight. "I left this village because I wanted you both to have more. Food on your plates, books in your hands, choices in your lives. I thought the world beyond our home would give you that." Kola glanced at her, his voice soft. "And it did, Mama. You worked hard for us. You gave us everything." Ebony shook her head gently. "No, my son. I gave what money could buy, but I forgot that the heart hungers too. I learned that no land, no job, no distant dream is richer than the heart that loves you." Her words lingered in the air like embers. Tommy took her mother's hand, pressing it against her cheek. "We know that now, Mama. We all do." Ebony chuckled, the sound tender. "Good. Then the journey was not wasted." She glanced at the moon, her eyes soft and full. "The moon travels the whole sky, yet it always returns to shine on its home. So it is with us." Kola added another piece of wood to the fire, the flames rising brighter for a moment. "Tell us one of your stories, Mama," he said quietly. Ebony nodded. "All right. There once was a bird," she began, "who flew far from its nest to find a golden tree. It flew for many seasons, through storms and across oceans, chasing the promise of wealth. But one day the bird grew tired. It turned back and found that its nest, the one it left behind, had blossomed into a golden tree all along." Tommy smiled through glistening eyes. "The bird found its home again." "Yes," Ebony whispered. "Because sometimes, the treasure you search for is waiting in the soil you once called ordinary." The fire crackled softly. The three of them sat there long after the story ended, watching the flames fade into glowing embers. The moonlight brushed their faces gently as if blessing them. Ebony closed her eyes and breathed deeply, the smell of wood smoke, earth and peace filling her lungs. For the first time since she had stepped foot back in her village, she felt whole. That night, under the soft watch of the moon, a mother and her children became a family again. Months later, the village had changed, not in its shape or color but in its spirit. The story of Mama Abney had spread beyond her compound, whispered at markets, told beside fires, retold by mothers to daughters. Kola's small workshop stood proudly beside the main road, a wooden sign painted with bold letters, Kola Mechanic, honest work, steady hands. The sound of hammers and laughter mixed in the air as villagers brought their motorbikes and cars for repair. Kola worked with pride, his hands strong, his eyes clear, every turn of the wrench a reminder that redemption could build more than engines. Tommy, now in her crisp white uniform, prepared to leave for the city. She had won a scholarship to study nursing, her smile radiant as she packed her small suitcase. "I'll make you proud, Mama," she said. Abney hugged her tightly. "You already have. Go and heal others, the world needs gentle hands." And Abney herself? She reopened her life with quiet determination. Using the little she had saved, the same savings she once thought she'd lost, she started a small bakery near the village square. The air around it smelled of fresh bread, sweet rolls and cinnamon. She called it, the Returning Mother. Every morning people gathered there, children with coins in their palms, elders with stories on their tongues. And when customers asked about the name, she would smile and say, "Because every journey worth taking must one day return home." The villagers spoke of her resilience with admiration. They no longer saw her as the woman who left, but as the mother who came back stronger, who turned betrayal into wisdom and sorrow into sweetness. One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast a golden glow across the bakery, Kola came to visit. He helped her close the shutters and sweep the floor. "Mama," he said softly, "you've changed this place." Abney looked out at the village, the children playing, the laughter drifting through the air. "No, my son," she replied with a serene smile. "This place changed me." Later, when the lamps were lit and the village quieted, her voice echoed softly in memory as if carried on the night wind. "Sometimes when you return home, it is not to find what you left, but to become what your home needs." The moon rose once again over the rooftops, bathing everything in silver peace. And in that quiet village, filled with bread, laughter and stories, the legend of the returning mother lived on.